Welcome to the Endo Belly Girl podcast. I'm your host, Alyssa Chavez. I'm a nutritional therapy practitioner and restorative wellness practitioner on a mission to change the way that we support women with endometriosis. Endo is a full-body disease that impacts your mind, body, and spirit in countless ways that aren't often addressed the way that women truly deserve. We are here to talk about all of it. Please keep in mind that the content of this show has been created for educational purposes only and should never be used as a replacement for medical diagnosis or treatment. Hey, my friend, and welcome back to the Endo Belly Girl podcast. I am Alyssa Chavez, your host and your friendly neighborhood functional nutritionist. And I am here to share with you all things endo and health and nutrition and all the things to help you live a better life with endo. And today, we are not actually going to talk directly about endo, but we are going to talk about something that tends to overlap a lot with endometriosis. In fact, I would say probably at least half of my clients that I'm currently working with also have issues in this area going on, and that is your thyroid. I know it may not seem like a super sexy topic talking about the thyroid, but it is something that I think is worth having a conversation about because there's a lot to understand about thyroid, and I think it's an area that a lot of people don't really have a lot of awareness of. And so what we're going to do today is just dive into at least the foundations of what you need to know about your thyroid so that if you do have thyroid dysfunction going on that you know about, or maybe you don't know and you just have some symptoms going on that you think potentially could point towards that, you're going to leave with some information today to help you with that. So one thing that I think is important to know, to understand starting out is that there is a lot of overlap and actually even kind of a higher risk between thyroid and endometriosis. So the U.S. Endometriosis Association actually reports that people diagnosed with endometriosis are 6 times more likely to have an underactive thyroid. And endo warriors who do have an underactive thyroid and or thyroid autoimmunity also have a greater risk of greater pelvic pain or more severe endometriosis. So it's kind of a two-way street with that. It's probably one of those chicken or the egg kind of things. And I'm really a firm believer too in that any of this stuff, if there's thyroid stuff going on and or endometriosis going on, that isn't really the root of the issue anyway. Those are both symptoms that your body is showing you that something's out of balance in the first place. So it's not uncommon, right? If there's an imbalance somewhere in your body, that it's going to crop up in ways like endometriosis, and it may also crop up in things like thyroid dysfunction. So anyway, and they're also, by the way, are showing some links between thyroid function and the progression of endometriosis. So there's a lot of connections going on there, a lot of things to think about. But basically, this is an important thing to stay on top of. So what we're going to look at today is, first of all, what your thyroid actually is and what it does. For those of you who may have heard of it but aren't super familiar with it. And also signs of dysfunction, some of those symptoms that you might experience if you have an underactive thyroid. Of course, it is also possible to have an overactive thyroid. That would be a hyperthyroid kind of situation. We're not going to dig into that so much today just because, honestly, I don't see that as much with endometriosis. I tend to see a lot more of a lower thyroid function. So that's kind of more what we're going to focus on today, but just know that it can go either direction. And then we'll also take a look at how to test for it. That is something that's important because if you just go into your doctor and say, hey, I'd like to get my thyroid checked out, they may not actually do all the testing that you need to get the full thyroid picture. And so we'll unpack that today as well. And of course, the most important part, how to support your thyroid health. So let's dig in. For starters, what is your thyroid? That's always a good place to start. Your thyroid is a butterfly-shaped gland that sits in your throat. And so it's fairly small. And what it really does, its main job, is that it regulates your metabolism. So your thyroid produces two hormones, T4 and T3, which then send signals to your cells throughout your entire body. So your thyroid sets the metabolic rate of everything. It actually affects every system in your body. It affects bone metabolism. It affects digestive and gut health. It sets the pace for gut motility. It impacts your female sex hormones, your gallbladder, your liver, and detoxification. Fun fact there, a slow thyroid leads to a sluggish liver, but also the other way around. A sluggish liver can also lead to a slow thyroid. So those two things can very much impact each other in both directions. Your thyroid also impacts your growth hormones, fat burning, insulin and glucose metabolism, cholesterol. So many things are impacted by your thyroid. Now, how in the world do you know if thyroid might be an issue for you? Well, I'm going to list out for you some of the common hypothyroid symptoms that come up frequently. So that can look like brain fog, fatigue, depression and or anxiety, cold sensitivity or maybe cold hands and feet, losing your hair, that can be on your head, your body, or even that outer third of your eyebrows is super common, dry or itchy skin, constipation or sluggish bowels, chronic digestive problems, joint or muscle pain, high cholesterol, weight gain or weight loss resistance. Those are some of those common symptoms of hypothyroid. So when you hear hypothyroid, that's HYPO, hypothyroid, that is going to point towards a thyroid that is a little slower, a little more sluggish. That's what hypothyroid is, as opposed to hyperthyroid, HYPER, which would be an overactive thyroid, like it's working too hard. So if you're listening to that list of symptoms and some of that, or maybe all of that, sounds familiar to you, it is time to get a full thyroid panel and get that checked out. Now, this is something that's really important to be aware of because I can't tell you how often I have had clients come to me saying, hey, I'm feeling fatigued all the time and I've got brain fog going on. I've got chronic digestive issues. And I'll ask them, oh, have you had your thyroid checked out? And they'll say, yeah, my doctor checks it all the time and everything always comes back normal. But then when I dig deeper and take a look at what the doctor is actually running on them, oftentimes, I would say more often than not, what I see is that they're only running TSH, which is thyroid stimulating hormone, and maybe T4, if we're lucky, on a good day. Oftentimes, it's just TSH. Now, this is a problem because it doesn't give us the full picture. So I mentioned earlier that your thyroid produces two hormones, which are T4 and T3. Now, you'll notice that neither of those is called TSH. And that's because TSH isn't actually produced in your thyroid. TSH is a hormone that's produced by the pituitary, which is part of your brain. And it's sent as a signal to the thyroid to tell the thyroid how much thyroid hormone to produce. And it's all based on a feedback loop that comes from signals coming back from your body. So yeah, TSH it's related to the thyroid, right? It's thyroid stimulating hormone, but it's really more a measure of the pituitary function than it is actual thyroid function, because then we have to wonder, well, how well is the thyroid responding to that pituitary stimulation? And then what's happening from there? Because, for example, the T4 that comes out of the thyroid needs to be converted to T3, which is the active form of the hormone that actually is able to get into the cells and the tissues and send signals in that way. And all of that needs to be able to function as well. So yeah, just testing TSH just doesn't give us the full picture. What we really need to see is a full thyroid panel. And I always ask for this with my clients, especially if they have thyroid-related symptoms going on. So that does include TSH, but also includes T3 and T4, both total T3, total T4, as well as free T3 and free T4, which is measuring how much hormone is actually available for binding in the system. Also reverse T3, T3 uptake, and the thyroid antibodies. This is another one that's commonly missed. And those antibodies are really important to look at because that can look for any autoimmune type activity. So I know some of my endo friends out there may already have, for example, a Hashimoto's diagnosis, which is a thyroid autoimmune condition. And it's actually one of the super common causes of hypothyroidism. So even if we have a full picture of all the thyroid hormones, but we haven't checked out the thyroid antibodies, we might still be missing a piece of the puzzle. And knowing whether you have an autoimmune condition going on is kind of an important thing to be aware of when it comes to trying to get back to health. And I will mention too, we've talked before on the podcast about how endometriosis is really in immune dysfunction at its root. And so having autoimmune type activity in your body is something to really be aware of because we want to really be able to support that overall immune function. And the way that we address hypothyroid, depending on whether there's autoimmune function happening or not, is it's going to affect the way that we look at that. So I always recommend running a full thyroid panel. You can definitely go and request that from your doctor. Take that list of markers, or usually at least if you say a full thyroid panel, they'll know what that means. But it's always good to kind of go in with a list of markers and say, this is what I would like. Now, one thing to be aware of too is that if you're running those markers with a conventional medical doctor, they're going to be looking at the conventional medical ranges, which is basically looking for, is there a disease or is there not? And so that's where functional work comes in, because when I, for example, am looking at a thyroid panel, I'm going to be looking at functional ranges or optimal ranges for those same markers, which can give us information and can help us to find imbalances sooner, right? You shouldn't have to wait until your thyroid is completely out of whack before you get some sort of support for it. So knowing if something is just a little bit out of range from a functional perspective can help us to correct those imbalances sooner so it doesn't lead to a full-blown hypothyroid picture or autoimmune disorder or whatever, because we can kind of handle that sooner if that's a thing for you. All right, so let's say you've done that already. Let's say you've done some testing. You know you've had some hypothyroid type symptoms. You've gotten that full thyroid panel done, and you've seen on paper that, yes, okay, there is some dysfunction happening. First of all, I do always recommend, whenever it's possible, to work with some sort of functional practitioner who can help you understand what's going on. Because even when I say hypothyroid, what that really means is a little bit different for everybody, because sometimes it actually means that the thyroid is kind of under functioning, sometimes and it's just not creating enough thyroid hormone, in which case we want to understand why. And sometimes it is more of that pituitary picture where the pituitary is just not telling the thyroid to produce very much hormone. And sometimes it's actually more of a conversion issue where the thyroid is producing enough hormone, but it's not being converted into its active form, which could be a sign of multitude of things, needing certain nutrients, needing liver support, since that's primarily where that conversion happens. There's so many things. And then, or are there antibodies present, which can tell us a little bit about the immune activity happening in your body, which can absolutely impact thyroid as well. So that is going to make a difference in how to address it. What I'm going to talk about today is kind of more of the general things that I would recommend to anyone and everyone who is having thyroid stuff going on, kind of the foundational stuff, because you want to start with that first. So first and foremost, I think it's important to know, like many things, we're always asking questions, or at least I'm always asking the questions of, every time we uncover something, then we want to figure out like, okay, but why is that happening? And why is that happening? And why is that happening? So let's say you got those test results back and found out that you have a little bit of a hypothyroid situation happening. Then my next question is, okay, well, why is that happening? Because just because your thyroid numbers are out of balance doesn't mean, oh, cool, I found the root cause of all of my problems, because thyroid is related again to hormones. And as I like to, or the general endocrine system, right? We've got our sex hormones like estrogen and progesterone, and then we have the thyroid hormones like T4 and T3. Those are all hormones of some kind or another. And whenever there's dysfunction in the hormones, it's important to remember that that is not a root cause in and of itself. Hormone imbalance of any kind is a symptom. And our job, my job as a functional practitioner, and your job as a human being who wants to feel better, I suppose, is to figure out the root cause of why that's happening in the first place. So when it comes to thyroid in particular, when your thyroid starts kind of slowing down, really that's an adaptive and a protective response in your body, meaning there's some reason that your body doesn't feel safe. Something is causing stress. And our job is to identify the stressors. So that can include a variety of things. That can include things like chemicals, bacteria, infections, a poor diet, food intolerances, undereating, overtraining, having poor sleep, having life stress like relationships or trauma, or just kind of poor mindset stuff happening. Those are all stressors that can impact the function of the thyroid. So step one is really figuring out what those stressors might be for your unique body. This is something that I help guide my clients through and, reduce or if possible, remove those stressors so that that's not just continuing to put stress on your body and causing that thyroid to want to slow down a little bit. And then you'll want to think about how to support your body. So step one, remove the stressors or at least reduce the stressors. And then step two, support your body. So thinking about nutrition, right? That's always a good place to start. You guys know I'm all about food first approach. How can you support your thyroid through the food that you're eating? Number one on the list is keeping your blood sugar balanced. That's key for any sort of hormone health. If you're struggling with the sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone, we'll dig more into that another day. I'll keep it focused on the thyroid, but same thing. If there's any sort of hormone that's out of balance, including the thyroid hormones, blood sugar balance is key. You're not going to bring those hormones and that thyroid back into balance without working on balancing the blood sugar first. I did a full episode on blood sugar. It was actually just blood sugar in relation to hormones, and that was episode 21. I can link to that in the show notes if you want to take a deeper dive on all things blood sugar and why that matters for the hormones. But just know that that's important. And then there are also some nutrients that are really critical for your thyroid health, which includes selenium, copper, magnesium, niacin, riboflavin, vitamin B6, zinc, vitamin A, and iodine as well, although I have some caveats on that. Your body does need iodine in order to produce the thyroid hormones. However, you want to be careful not to get too much iodine in your system, especially if there is autoimmunity present, the Hashimoto's. You don't want to have too much iodine. So that's something that I would typically recommend, working with somebody to kind of figure out what's best for you. But I think just getting food sources of iodine is really the best bet for most people. Getting in some seafood is typically the best source of iodine. Sea veggies are really great. Contains a lot of trace minerals as well, which can help to remove excess estrogen and also bind toxins. Like I said, just be careful when it comes to Hashimoto's and autoimmunity. You definitely want to support your gut. So things like eating fiber, probiotics, prebiotics, Bone broth to help to support your gut lining can be really great as well. Food sources of selenium. Selenium is a wonderful mineral that is super important for thyroid health. So food sources can be Brazil nuts are really the best known food source of selenium. So like 1 to 2 Brazil nuts a day is a good amount. You don't want to go too crazy. That doesn't mean eat 14 Brazil nuts. Like 1 or 2 a day is plenty. Sesame seeds are also high in selenium, as are mushrooms and organ meats. And it's nice also to get in your diet when you're working on thyroid health some natural binders / chelators. I'm not going to go super into detail on what that means today, but basically things that bind to toxins in your body and can help remove them. So that includes fibers, get in plenty of veggies, cilantro, coriander, curcumin, green tea, matcha, spirulina. Those are all really good natural binders and chelators that you can include in your diet as well. When it comes to thyroid health, supporting your liver health is really, really crucial and important because your thyroid hormones are primarily converted in your liver. So your thyroid primarily produces T4, and that T4 has to be converted to the active form T3, and most of that conversion happens in the liver. So if the liver is nice and healthy and robust, that's going to make that whole process a whole heck of a lot easier and better. So supporting the liver health, and that means reducing things that can burden your liver, things like alcohol, drugs, whether prescription or otherwise, oral hormones, toxins, sugar, food that you may be sensitive to, stress. Those are all things that can burden the liver. And also being aware of chemicals, things like BPA in plastics, phthalates, parabens that are found oftentimes in household goods and personal care products, triclosan, which is often found in antibacterial soaps and toothpastes and deodorants and hairspray, and fluoride. Fluoride's a really important one because fluoride can displace iodine in your system, and we don't want that either. So that's often found in toothpaste and other things. So being aware of those toxins that can place a burden on your liver can really, really help it out. And then there's also some wonderful liver supports like milk thistle, dandelion root, glutathione, beetroot. I really get this in more than anything by just eating beets. Like I like to roast some beets and I just keep them in the fridge and try to eat those on a regular basis. Dandelion root, I actually like to take that in tea form. Milk thistle you can get in tea form also. Sometimes you can even find kind of a blend of those and just steep it and enjoy that way. So those are some of those herbs and things that can really support your liver health, which is just good for endo in general, not just for the thyroid piece of it. I mentioned supporting your gut health. Primarily, the thyroid hormones are converted in your liver, but some of them are also converted in your gut, and also excess hormones are eliminated through your gut. So we want to have a nice, healthy gut, healthy elimination. Gut imbalances is something to be aware of if there is too much of the bad gut bacteria and other pathogens in your system. That can absolutely impact the way that you feel and the overall function of your gut and all the things. I personally like to use a GI map, which is a stool test to check that out. Not something that you want to just guess on and hope that you get it right as far as your what's happening inside of your gut. So if it's possible to do some testing on that, that can be hugely beneficial for thyroid health amongst other things. And just supporting your overall healthy digestive function, making sure that your body's actually breaking foods down well and things are functioning properly there, because that can all really impact. Because if you have things like parasites or bacterial overgrowth or fungal overgrowth or SIBO, which is small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, that can all matter and have an impact on your body. One other thing that I did want to mention is gluten. we've talked about gluten on the podcast before because I would say the vast majority of endo warriors that I run into just do better without gluten in their system. It just can be very inflammatory. Many people have intolerances to it. So if you've never experimented with going gluten-free, I think it's worth at least giving it a go for like 30 days and see how your body does. But one thing that's really important to note when it comes to thyroid stuff is the concept of molecular mimicry. Because the structure of gluten molecules is very similar to thyroid molecules, and your body can make antibodies for gluten, which can then end up binding to your thyroid. And this is something that happens very commonly in thyroid autoimmunity. So if you have known thyroid autoimmunity happening, absolutely you need to be going gluten-free because that can have huge impacts on your overall health. And if you have just general hypothyroid stuff going on, it's probably still worth at least experimenting with and see how you feel without gluten in your system, because it can really impact that overall inflammation and immune health and just a lot of those little things. So definitely something to consider along this journey. So in short, this is the kind of the down and dirty version of supporting your thyroid health. There's a lot to thyroid health. Of course, there's a lot more than I could really cover in one podcast episode. I didn't really dig deep into Hashimoto's today, for example, the autoimmune stuff. I know I mentioned it a little bit. We will dig more into that stuff. I find all the autoimmune stuff to be super interesting, and it's becoming more and more common. I can't tell you how many of my endometriosis clients also have autoimmunity going on. I have clients who do have Hashimoto's as well. I have clients who have celiac or Crohn's disease, other autoimmune conditions as well. And it makes sense, really, because if endometriosis is an immune dysfunction, then, of course, we're often going to be just more prone to autoimmune type conditions as well. Or maybe vice versa. Maybe the autoimmunity makes us more prone to endometriosis. Chicken or the egg. But in short, when it comes to supporting thyroid health, step 1, reduce those stressors on your body. Step 2, support what your body really needs to do all of the things that it needs to do. And the more that we take away the things that are not helping your body and give your body the things that it needs, that is going to support your thyroid health. And great news along this way, that will also help to support endometriosis. So I do always recommend to look into working with a functional practitioner if you have a lot of stuff going on there. It's just a lot to take on by yourself, let's be real. I've tried that in the past. I've seen many people who have tried that, who have spent so much time, energy, and effort trying to fix their own health and figure out all the things, and it's just a lot to handle. So if you can work with somebody who can help you to navigate that and get you back to feeling great again, I always recommend that. You can always reach out to me. I do offer a free consultation if you're thinking about diving into this work. That link is always available in the show notes, but it doesn't even have to be me, right? More than anything, even the reason I created this podcast as a free resource for everybody is just to help get this information out there. So more than anything, I would encourage you just to find somebody who really you click with, you resonate with, you feel like you can connect with, and that who understands everything that's going on in your body so that you can get back to a place of feeling really good. So whatever that means for you, I really encourage you to look into that, really bring your body into optimal health, because at the end of the day, what in the world is more important than your health? I feel like I'm learning that more and more every day, but it's so true. Like, what is actually more important than your health? So I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. If you ever have any questions, comments, you want to connect in any fashion, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at EndoBellyGirl. I would love to hear from you and hear your thoughts on the show. And I will talk to you all soon. Much love. Thank you so much for joining me today, my friend. If you loved what you heard, be sure to share with a friend and subscribe so that you can keep coming back for more. If you are ready to take the next step towards getting to the root cause of your endo symptoms like endobelly, pain, fatigue, and so much more, you need to download my free ultimate guide to building your own endometriosis diet. You can find the link in the show notes or at www.endobellygirl.com. Until next time, my friend.